Hello, welcome to this workshop provided by the Language and Learning Support Team, Preparing a Strong Conference Abstract. This workshop is for HDR students planning to submit an abstract for consideration for the upcoming CDU HDR conference. The workshop covers concepts related to conference abstracts, as well as abstracts in general. But bear in mind, we do not cover all types of abstracts. For example, we don't discuss video abstracts in this workshop. Also be mindful that this session considers the general properties of abstracts, but cannot account for all the possible types and styles of abstracts you may encounter. We would like to begin by acknowledging the Larrakia people, the traditional custodians of this land. We would also like to pay our respects to elders both past and present and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. Let's start with the basics. Do you know when the CDU HDR conference is? The conference is scheduled for August 28 and 29. This will be an online event. This workshop will help you to prepare an abstract for this conference. You still have time as abstracts are due on May 15. Hopefully this session will encourage you to put an abstract together as the first step to participating in this exciting event. Pause the video for a moment to think about the question. Why should you participate in the CDU HDR conference? How might you benefit from this experience? I hope some of these suggestions are similar to yours. As a first step, writing an abstract will develop your abstract writing skills. Skills you are likely to continue using during your studies and your career. Participation in the conference will also give you the opportunity to work on your presentation skills. A conference gives you the chance to see and give feedback on the work of others. The CDU HDR conference is a great chance to network with both staff and fellow HDR students. This is a chance to share your research, to showcase it. Often research can feel quite solitary, but this is a chance to tell others what you've been up to. The conference will also give you the opportunity to get some feedback on the work you are doing. Are you convinced you should participate? Let's have a look at what we will cover in this session to help you get your abstract into shape. We will look at the role of abstracts, abstract content, the language of abstracts, how to engage your readers, and we'll also make suggestions for avoiding common pitfalls. Finally, I will suggest some ideas and resources you may find useful when developing your abstract for the CDU HDR conference and future conferences. Let's start by considering the role of abstracts. What do you already know about abstracts? I imagine a fair amount, and that some of what we discussed today might not be new to you. To consider what we know, we'll do a short activity. Give yourself a minute to jot down your responses to 3 questions. Where can we find abstracts? Who reads abstracts? And what is their purpose? Or why do we need them, or how do we use them? Pause the recording now while you take a minute to think and write some notes. Starting with question 1, where can you find abstracts? Did you note down these ideas? At the beginning of theses and journal articles, in conference programs, in databases. We can also see them outside the educational context, for example, in professional industry reports, where they may be called an executive summary. So, who reads abstracts? Here are some suggestions. Other researchers in your field, other researchers in related fields, journal editors, your research supervisor, thesis examiners, conference organisers, policymakers, clients and managers if you're writing professional reports. These are just some suggestions. You may have thought of some others. And our next question, what is the purpose of an abstract? Due to the wide range of places we find abstracts and also the wide range of readers, abstracts have many important roles. Abstracts may be viewed as a standalone text that provides a summary of a longer text. An abstract may be used to give a preview of an article, to give readers an overview or a roadmap. Abstracts also serve as a screening device. They help potential readers, including other researchers, decide if they wish to read your research. A good abstract should persuade conference organisers to invite you to present and persuade conference delegates to attend your conference presentation. Abstracts are also used by editors, reviewers, and examiners to consider the relevance and robustness of your research. Think of your abstract as your first impression. The reader of your abstract should want to know more. If we look at this slide again, specifically thinking about conference abstracts, some of the keywords here are convince and persuade, as well as relevance and robustness. Moving on to the content of abstracts. What do you think are the essential ingredients of a good conference abstract? Pause the video just briefly while you think about this question. Can you think of at least 3? Belcher, in their book Writing Your Journal Article in 12 Weeks, lists several ingredients. A good abstract summarizes a whole article. It does not merely introduce. It tells a story by starting with a puzzle or problem. It clearly states the argument or claim of the author. An abstract might not present all your findings, but it will reveal the most valuable ones. And it gives a brief overview of methods. Language choices are also important in a good abstract. Think about your verb choices. Use strong verbs, not vague ones. Make sure you include your identified keywords in your abstract. This will increase the likelihood of your work being found. Now that we've considered ingredients, let's look at some specifications of abstracts. These draw our attention to the fact that different types of abstracts have different features, and the fact that we need to think about the purpose and content of our abstract so that we can decide how to write it. First, review the information in the table about thesis abstracts and article abstracts. Then think about conference abstracts. What is the purpose of a conference abstract? Who is the audience? How long do you think a conference abstract is likely to be? And what is the emphasis of a conference abstract? What do you think? We've talked about some of this before. Your conference abstract helps organisers and attendees decide whether they're interested in your session. Audience, researchers, scholars, and peers. Usually not always from your field or related fields. In the case of the CDU HDR conference, your audience will be staff and HDR candidates, so you can expect a varied audience. What about length? This will vary from conference to conference, but length tends to be on the shorter side. Check in with ORI for information about the expected length of your abstract for the coming HDR conference. Finally, when writing an abstract, be mindful to align it with the theme or themes of the conference. We've considered enough context, so it's time to explore a sample abstract. I will show you an abstract on screen. It contains 5 moves or steps. Read the abstract closely. Can you identify these moves? Pause the recording on this screen for a few moments to identify the 5 distinct moves or steps in the abstract. Here is the same abstract. Compare your ideas to the colour-coded version. Are these the 5 steps you identified? Let's label them. In purple, the abstract starts with background and in this case identifies a specific gap in knowledge that will be investigated. In black, the aim of the present study is stated clearly. In green, we can see the method used to conduct the research. Not in detail, but a clear overview is provided. In blue, we find the results of the research. And finally, in red, we can read about the conclusions the researcher has reached and the significance of the research outcomes. Here is another abstract example. Again, pause the recording on this screen for a few moments to identify the 5 distinct moves or steps in the abstract. And here is an analysis of the abstract. It uses the same colours and labels as the previous example. Was your analysis the same? Pause to take a closer look if you need to. This 5-step structure comes from the work of Swales and Feek. For each of the 5 moves, when we are writing an abstract, reviewing our own work, or looking at the work of other scholars, we will generally be able to identify these moves. Move 1 answers questions such as, what is the topic and why is it important? Move 2 tells the reader what the study is about. Move 3 focuses on methods and outlines what was done. Move 4 answers the important question, what was the outcome of the research? And Move 5 tells us why the outcomes matter. What do they mean? Why are they important? When you look at abstracts in the articles you read, can you identify these moves? All of them? Only some of them? We will talk about this more shortly. But first, returning to our original example, this is an example of an abstract when research is complete. You may be wondering about how to prepare an abstract for your upcoming conference if your research is not complete. Let's consider this question. If your study isn't complete, you will still follow the moves identified by Swales and Feek, but you will need to accommodate for the incomplete nature of your work. Pause to read the example again and think about what might change if your study is not yet completed. One aspect that is likely to change is language. Look at the examples highlighted here. When talking about my method, I might need to talk about my future plans using will, for example, rather than the past tense. And I won't be able to talk about definitive results. Instead, I will need to talk about expected results. Similarly, I will focus on the potential significance of my findings. Here, side by side, we have an example of an abstract about a complete study on the left and an abstract about a work in progress on the right. Pause to consider the similarities and differences between these two examples. Some, but not all of the differences are indicated in red. Returning then to our earlier table showing the 5 moves of Swales and Feek, if my study is incomplete, I may be answering questions such as what will be done rather than what was done, and what results do I expect to get. By now, you may be wondering whether all abstracts contain all 5 moves. The answer is no. So let's consider another question. Which moves do you think are the most common? Here are the 5 moves again. Which do you think are the most common? If you could only choose two, what would they be? Pause while you think about this. What did you choose? Number 2 and number 4 are the most common generally. But please allow me to remind you, I use the word generally and I encourage you to conduct your own investigation. When you read abstracts in your own discipline, do they reinforce the findings of Swales and Feek, or do you find some differences? It is important to not just understand these general patterns, but to think about the extent to which they are reflected in your field of study. It's time to look at another example. What moves or steps can you identify in this example? Have any of the moves been omitted? Pause the recording while you consider this question. Using the same approach and the colour coding as we have used in previous examples. In the case of this example, the writer has not included background, but the abstract nevertheless gives a good overview of the work conducted by the researcher, Muko. This does not mean that we can omit background from all abstracts, but more so that we make decisions on a case-by-case basis and that these will be determined by factors such as topic and discipline. Perhaps more importantly, note that we can clearly identify the remaining moves and that the abstract provides a clear summary of what we can expect in the research paper. Hopefully, you now have some additional insights into the content of abstracts. Some students find the idea of colour coding and labelling sections of the abstract a helpful strategy for checking their work. If so, that's great. Regardless of what techniques you use, when you are writing abstracts, your writing will always benefit if you think about the purpose of each sentence you write. What does each sentence contribute? And how does each sentence map against the moves we have identified? So what's next? Let's think about the language of abstracts. When we talk about language, we are talking generally, not in all cases. Students often ask about tenses. The table shows the tenses generally used for each of the 5 moves. Moves 1 and 2 are likely to be written in the present tense. Moves 3 and 4 are likely to be written in the past. And move 5 again is likely to be written in the present. Remember, we've already talked about how this might vary for research that is incomplete. And again, remember one of the best ways to inform your own abstracts will be to look at abstracts in your discipline, look at abstracts from conferences you attend, and from journals you hope to be published in. These are rich sources of information. 2 other aspects of language that we should consider are keywords and strong verbs. Keywords are going to help people find your research and also signal that you understand your field, so make sure that you are mindful of including your keywords in your abstract. Other word choices are also important. Think about the verbs you use. Do you want the reader to think that you tried to do something, that you attempted to do something, or that your research actually shows, reveals, or discovers? Think about the power of strong active verbs such as argues or demonstrates rather than examines. Sometimes the choice of individual words is very important. Now let's think about what we can do to engage our readers. Birkenkotter and Hucken identified features that distinguish highly rated abstracts from low rated abstracts. Although these seem like common sense, the list provided by Birkenkotter and Hucken gives us another frame we can use to view our own work. When writing your abstract, consider the list provided by the scholars. Is your topic of current interest? Have you defined your problem clearly? Have you approached your research in a new way? Have you indicated that you understand other scholarship relevant to your own work? Does your language reflect current terminology in your field? Continuing to think about language, we want to grab our reader's attention from the beginning of our abstract. Here is the abstract we have already looked at several times. It starts with Move 1. Have a look at Move 1 and decide what language the writers have used to grab the attention of the reader. Pause while you consider this question. Hopefully you noticed that the writer uses expressions such as is crucial to and to the best of our knowledge, no studies have been conducted. The second expression indicates the gap clearly. It focuses the reader's attention on why this research stands alone. Another strategy for engaging your reader is to be clear and direct. If you start with move 1, start by providing a clear context for your work and/or identify the problem or gap that will be your focus. A couple of examples are provided. Pause to consider these. A similar approach is recommended if your abstract starts with move 2. Notice in this example, the writer immediately and directly states the focus of their research. Thinking again about being clear and direct, if you start with move 2, start with your purpose or objective, or start with a researcher action. A couple of examples are provided. Pause to consider these. In response to a question in the recent live session on this topic, if your abstract requires a title, give this due consideration. I'm sure you are aware of the common structure of academic headings. 2 parts divided by a colon. Let's look at some examples to consider these parts. The first part, before the colon, is your attention getter. Following the colon, we might see some specific detail, a question that your research addresses, or a reference to the methods used in your research. Finally, notice that these titles are not too broad. We also try to include some of our keywords. The important point here is your reader should want to know more after reading your title. Typical review comments on abstracts can give us insights into how to develop our own work. So next, we will consider abstracts from this perspective so that we can avoid some common pitfalls. Take a look at some common reviewer feedback and think about the advice that might be offered to the writer of the abstract. Here is the feedback. The author has written more than 400 words in the abstract. It's verbose and doesn't get to the point. The abstract doesn't flow. It looks like the author just cut and pasted sentences from the body of the paper. Nice idea, but in general, I think the abstract is unbalanced. Too much on your method and not enough about what has been learned from your study and why it matters. The abstract is only understandable after the paper has been read. It should be understandable to a general engineering literate audience, not just those few researchers within the author's very specific subfield. The authors have failed to state why the scientific community should be interested in their work, nor what value is being added to what is already known. This abstract is too descriptive. It gives a structure, but no real information or facts. Pause to consider. What does the abstract writer need to do to address the feedback? In the first example, be succinct and direct. In the second, provide a cohesive summary of the paper, not just sentences from within the paper. If you're told your content is unbalanced, think a bit more about the moves that we've discussed today to ensure that your content is balanced. Make sure that your abstract is clear to an educated, non-specialist audience. Make the relevance and significance of your work clear in your abstract. And be informative. Only write a descriptive abstract if you're required to do so. To develop your abstract, think about where you might go for some feedback. Your supervisor, your colleagues. And when you receive feedback, think about how you can apply it to your work. What actions do you need to take to address any concerns raised in feedback you receive? The feedback we've just looked at also provides us with a checklist that we can use when we consider the quality and features of our own abstract writing. Finally, here are some suggestions for resources you may find useful when you are developing your abstract and for academic writing more generally. The Language and Learning Study Skills pages include a dedicated section on writing an abstract. Scan the QR code to find more information and activities to develop your skills. Are you familiar with the University of Manchester Academic Phrase Bank? If so, I hope you appreciate what a fantastic resource this is. If not, use the QR code to take a look around. The Manchester Academic Phrase Bank gives you access to a collection of the common language that we use in academic writing. It is organised into clear functions and themes as the screenshot indicates. For example, do you want to know how academics identify a gap? How they describe this gap in their writing? Go to the relevant section of the phrase bank. I'm sure you will find this resource useful not only for your abstract, but more generally in your HDR pursuits and your future career. We have also developed a writing template to help you structure your abstract and ensure it contains vital information. Scan the QR code to view and use this template. Before you leave this recording, take a moment to reflect. What do you most want to remember about writing an abstract? About writing your abstract? Keep this idea in mind as you prepare your abstract submission for the CDU HDR conference. If you have any questions about this recording or the support available for you through the library, please contact us at our email address askthelibrary@cdu.edu.au. Thank you for your time today. I wish you the best for your abstract writing and your studies.